After being locked up in a nuclear power plant, a mutant dog with radiation effects starts chasing a family and their dog, causing terror in the small town. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Atomic Dog, from 1998. At a nuclear power plant in California, after feeding a dog, Matt and the other employees are informed of a leak in Sector 2 and have to evacuate the site immediately. Just then, a trained team from the Atomic Regulatory Commission arrives at the plant with the mission of stopping the leak. At the sight of those men dressed in yellow overalls, Cerberus gets scared and runs away. Immediately, Matt starts calling for his son, but before he can catch him, the old man ends up being dragged out of the plant. Even against his will, the employee is forced to leave him and the dog is left alone in that contaminated place. A year later, Josh hitches a ride with some of his schoolmates around the city and, on the way, realizes that he is being followed by his sister's dog. Suddenly, Trixie jumps into the back of the truck and Josh asks his friends to turn around to take her back home, but Dwayne says that the dog is welcome to accompany them on the ride. After putting his daughter to bed, Brooke goes into the living room to spend time with his wife and asks where Josh is, as it's almost 10 p.m. At this point, Jennifer tries to calm her husband down and says that the boy went out with some friends from school. As they've recently moved to the city, Josh hasn't yet managed to adapt, so the couple try to give him the chance to build new friendships. While his parents are enjoying the evening together, Josh accompanies his new friends to the nuclear power plant and is startled to discover that Dwayne has a rifle. Seeing a dog walking in the yard, the man starts shooting at it and Josh tries to stop him, but Dwayne doesn't listen. When he realizes that those guys are a bad influence, Josh decides to leave with Trixie and they both walk alone through the darkness while listening to the animal howl. While looking for the dog, Dwayne ends up getting separated from his friends and uses a flashlight to illuminate the place while he searches every corner of the woods. Suddenly, during the search, the boy comes across his target and realizes that he has become the prey of the rabid dog, so he decides to run away. During the run, Dwayne trips over a tree branch and falls to the ground, but quickly manages to get up and continue his escape. The problem is that his predator is much faster than him, so the boy decides to take him on. However, as the young man prepares to shoot, Cerberus appears next to him and the fright causes him to fall off the cliff. Terrified by the dog's howls, Hank and Smitty leave and decide to leave their friend behind. After getting rid of his enemy, Cerberus smells Trixie and decides to follow her. By this time, Josh has arrived home with the dog and is scolded by his father for arriving after the agreed time. When confronted, the boy decides to tell what happened and reveals that the guys at his school are completely crazy. When he discovers that one of the young men was armed, Brooke and Jennifer are furious, but thank their son for telling the truth. Relieved to know that Josh is okay, the couple decide to go up to the bedroom and, while they're talking, they hear Trixie barking from downstairs, but they decide to ignore her. When she smells Cerberus, she tries to run away from home, but all the doors are locked. During the night, the dog manages to jump over the gate and finds a way to open the door so that Trixie can get out. The next morning, Dwayne's body is found on the banks of the river and the police begin to investigate the case. When she realizes that Trixie has disappeared, Heather and her family start looking for the dog and put up posters around the neighborhood. When he sees the news in the paper about the perishment of one of his colleagues, Josh begins to feel guilty for not being able to convince Dwayne to leave, but Jennifer reassures him and says that none of it is his fault. 2 months later, Trixie is still missing and her family has no idea that she is living in the nuclear power plant with Cerberus. One day, when the dog goes out to get some food, a group of scientists show up to take a look at the reactor and the dog runs away scared, leaving a trail of blood behind. A few hours later, when he returns to the hideout and smells blood, Cerberus realizes that Trixie has gone and begins to follow her trail in the hope of finding her. While playing basketball in their backyard, Josh and Heather hear Trixie barking and run towards her. When they finally find her, the two siblings realize that the dog is accompanied by 2 puppies who have just been born and, shortly after giving birth, Trixie ends up dying. Now, all they can do is look after the puppies and bury the poor dog's body. As the months go by, the puppies get bigger and bigger and every day Cerberus appears at the gate to visit his children. One day, a new resident arrives in the neighborhood and, when she sees Josh cleaning her garden, she offers him a generous payment to take care of her garden. When he hears the offer, the boy immediately accepts the job and says he will start the next morning. That afternoon, Cerberus starts howling in front of the family gate and Lobo becomes agitated, trying to get out of the house. Then, when Brooke opens the door, the dog attacks him and Josh has to interfere so that his father doesn't end up being seriously injured. However, soon after the attack, Lobo begins to act normally, so Brooke decides to take the 2 dogs to the vet to try to find out what happened and Cerberus goes after them. Upon hearing the report, The veterinarian says that he will carry out some tests to check the animal's health, but in order to understand the unusual behavior, it will be necessary to consult a specialist. Luckily, Janice Rifkin, the family's new neighbor, is a university professor who specializes in animal behavior and may be able to help them. It will take a few hours for Dr. Matoyan to carry out all the tests, so the family agrees to return to the office to pick up Lobo and Scamp the next morning. Knowing that his children are trapped inside the clinic, Cerberus finds a way to break in and waits for the right moment to act. At dusk, Dr. Matoyan tries to collect blood samples from Lobo for analysis and notices that the dog is very agitated, so he tries to immobilize him in order to carry out the collection. At this point, Cerberus appears and attacks the vet, believing that he was hurting his puppy. Desperate, Matoyan screams for help, but no one can hear him and he ends up being eliminated with a direct hit to the throat. After accomplishing his goal, the dog frees Lobo and they both return to the nuclear power plant. At dawn, when she shows up to pick up her dogs, Jennifer discovers that the vet has been eliminated and is taken to see Dr. Boyle. When he finds her, the coroner asks a few questions about Lobo and informs her that the animal may have been responsible for the attack. All the forensic experts know so far is that, during the night, the dog somehow got out of its cage and managed to escape. The man then tells Jennifer not to let the dog in if he comes home. After listening to all the recommendations, the woman picks up Scamp and leaves. That morning, as arranged, Josh goes to Janice's house and realizes that she houses different species of animals in captivity. The truth is that this woman has a PhD in animal biology and took those specimens to her home because the university where she works is undergoing renovations. At this point, Josh reveals that, after returning from the vet, his mother said that Lobo had run away after eliminating someone. Upon hearing this, Janice becomes curious to find out what motivated the attack and decides to go to the morgue to analyze Dr. Matoyan's body. After analyzing the bites on the man's neck, the biologist comes to the conclusion that a caged animal could never have done this to such an experienced veterinarian and claims that it was a wild animal that attacked him. At that moment, Josh remembers the dog that was howling outside his house just before Lobo attacked his father and claims that he has heard that same sound coming from the abandoned nuclear power plant. When she gets home, Janice analyzes the saliva samples from the animal that eliminated the vet under her microscope and realizes that all those cells have mutated. Based on this, the teacher comes to the conclusion that the creature that attacked him was exposed to radiation, which led to the changes in his cells. That afternoon, while out for a walk with Brooke and Heather, Scamp smells something familiar and starts running through the woods. Immediately, the girl runs after her dog and Brooke ends up losing sight of his daughter. During the search, Heather comes across Cerberus and is paralyzed with fear when Scamp appears to defend her. Soon after, Brooke arrives with a piece of wood in hand and tries to drive the animal away. However, when he realizes that the dog doesn't want to leave, the man takes a sound device out of his pocket and manages to use it to repel the animal. When she gets home, Heather tells her brother about the wild dog she found in the forest and reveals that Scamp was able to sniff it out from afar. That day, Jennifer decides to take her daughter for a walk in the city center. So Josh takes the opportunity to go into the forest in search of Cerberus and asks for Janice's help in capturing him. For this mission, the woman puts some tranquilizer darts and cartridges in her bag, as she knows she will have to eliminate the animal if she can't capture it alive. Arriving in the woods, the pair follow Scamp's scent and come across Lobo, who is now completely unrecognizable. The animal's aggressive behavior frightens Janice and the woman prepares to shoot, but can't get the shot off. At this point, Josh tries to calm the dog down, but ends up being attacked by it and has to use his arm as a shield to defend himself. In an attempt to help the boy, the biologist starts to hit Lobo with her gun, but is knocked down and about to take her first bite when Josh decides to pick up the gun and shoot the animal. Seeing his dog lying lifeless on the ground, the young man begins to feel remorseful, so Janice helps him back into the car so she can take him to hospital. Minutes later, Cerberus finds the body of his puppy in the middle of the forest and lies down next to it, hoping that Lobo will wake up. When he arrives at the hospital, Brooke is furious with Janice for taking his son into the woods without his permission, but Josh reveals that he lied, saying that his parents had authorized him to take part in the search. At this point, the young man tells him that he was bitten by Lobo, and the biologist reveals her suspicion that the wild dog that lives at the nuclear power plant may have been responsible for Dr. Matoyan's perishment. According to the tissue samples she took from Lobo's body, the dog was not involved in the attack, so Cerberus became the only suspect. Worried that the animal might attack other people, Janice decides to return to the forest alone and walks cautiously with her gun in hand, looking for the dog. When she arrives at the place where Lobo was disposed of, she discovers that the animal's body has disappeared and finds it buried under a grave made of dry leaves. When she arrives home with her daughter, Jennifer receives a call from the hospital and learns that her son has been bitten. However, Brooke asks his wife to stay at home with Heather, as Josh will be discharged that evening. A few hours later, the woman puts her daughter to bed and goes to her painting room. As she's wearing headphones, she doesn't even notice Cerberus approaching the house. The animal manages to climb onto the roof and breaks into the couple's bedroom through the window. When it smells Brooke, it ferociously destroys the pillows and then goes downstairs to Heather's room. When he gets there, the dog finds the girl sleeping, but he doesn't attack her because he knows that she has always treated his puppies with great love. Just then, Janice hears a noise and decides to go into the living room to see if her husband has arrived. However, at that moment, Brooke and Josh are still in the car, on their way home. When she enters Heather's room, Janice comes across the wild dog and grabs a metal object to try to keep it away from her daughter. While the woman is trying to drive the animal away, Brooke arrives home and, on hearing Heather's screams, Scamp runs into the bedroom to defend her. Seeing his baby and the other members of the family approaching, Cerberus runs out of the window and through the glass to get to the balcony of the house. As soon as the dog leaves, all the family members get into the car and head for Janice's house. After hearing everything that has happened, the biologist reveals her theory and says that Lobo and Scamp are most likely the offspring of Cerberus. It's likely that the dog is chasing the family because it wants its puppies back to form a pack. In an attempt to get more answers, Janice says she will spend the night in the lab studying Lobo's body, and Josh convinces his parents to allow him to accompany her on this investigation. In the morning, when Brooke and his family are convinced that they have gotten rid of the threat, Cerberus appears again and lures his puppy into an ambush. The animal starts barking to get Scamp's attention and, when the dog goes after him, Cerberus locks him inside the family warehouse. Hearing her dog barking, Heather immediately goes after him to find out what's going on and comes across the wild dog. At that moment, the girl asks what he wants and the animal starts pulling her by the sleeve of her jacket so that Heather follows him. When they realize the girl is missing, Jennifer and Brooke start looking for her and free Scamp so he can find her. However, Heather is already too far away and the dog can no longer sniff her out. So the couple have no choice but to ask Janice to help them find the animal's location. After hearing what happened, the biologist says that Cerberus has changed his initial plan. Now that Lobo has been eliminated and Scamp hates him, the animal has decided to take Heather to join his pack and intends to adopt her as his baby. The woman suspects that the dog has taken the girl to the nuclear power plant and creates a search strategy to rescue her. While Jennifer and Janice go to the plant, Brooke and Josh walk through the forest with Scamp so that the dog can sniff out the young woman's tracks. After a long walk, Heather says she's tired and lies down on Cerberus' bed to sleep. Minutes later, Janice arrives on the scene and breaks down the metal fence to break into the factory. Soon after, Brooke and Josh show up in the company of Scamp and continue following the girl's tracks. Seeing the dog's footprints on the floor of the power station, Janice confirms her theory that Cerberus lives there and prepares her rifle to fire in case the dog appears and tries to attack her. In an attempt to optimize the search, the two women decide to split up to look for Heather and, while searching the place, Janice comes across the wild animal. Immediately, the biologist fires a tranquilizer and manages to hit him, but the dog manages to remove the dart and runs after her. During the escape, Janice loses her rifle and has no weapon left to defend herself, so she decides to hide in the pipe. However, as she climbs the steps, Cerberus grabs her calf and starts pulling her by the leg. Luckily, the woman manages to get away from the attack and hide in a place where the dog can't reach her. Just then, Jennifer hears the sound of someone approaching and prepares to shoot. Just as she was about to pull the trigger, she recognized Scamp and was relieved to see her dog. After embracing the animal, the woman decides to follow it, as she knows it will lead her to Heather. When she realizes that Cerberus isn't around, Janice wraps the wound with pieces of cloth and goes to meet him. Just as he is about to find the girl, Scamp is interrupted by the arrival of Cerberus, at which point father and son start a battle. Hearing her mother's voice calling for her, Heather wakes up and reveals her location. As he is weaker and less experienced in duels, Scamp ends up losing the fight and, after defeating him, Cerberus goes after the humans who are trying to take the girl. When he sees Brooke and Josh approaching, the animal pulls a rope with the aim of eliminating his enemies with barrels containing chemicals. Before being hit, Brooke pushes his son away, but ends up fainting when the containers fall on his head. When he gets up, Josh realizes that his father is unconscious and tries to help him regain consciousness. In the meantime, Janice and Jennifer manage to find each other and, together, they arrive at the place where Heather is hiding. As mother and daughter hug, Cerberus appears and Janice grabs her rifle to get rid of the beast once and for all. However, Heather begs the woman not to hurt him and offers to try to calm him down. However, The biologist knows that they need to get out of there as soon as possible, so she fires numerous shots to scare the animal away. Along the way, the trio run into Josh and Brooke, so Jennifer helps her husband up so they can get the hell out of there. At that moment, the group realizes that Cerberus is nearby and tries to shoot him, but the dog once again manages to dodge the bullets. However, when he sees Heather in danger, the animal rushes to save her and pushes her away, but ends up being hit by a large number of metal pipes that were hanging from the ceiling. Seeing the injured dog, Heather thanks him for saving her life and, soon after, Scamp shows up to say goodbye to his father. The next morning, Heather and her family bury Lobo and Cerberus in the garden of the house, next to Trixie's grave. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.